In the time between this episode and the last, I was forced by my own maladies to enter one of the most feared locales on Earth, the dentist's office. I spent quite a bit of time mentally preparing myself for the tortures that had been described to me over the years, but as it turned out, 'twas for naught. Aside from a distressing amount of needling, everything went more smoothly than expected. Luckily for me, there were centuries of science applied to my treatments, turning them from grueling bloody tortures to minor irritations while I slowly fell asleep in the chair. But that made me wonder, what did dental patients of old have to look forward to before the days of heavenly anesthetics and mildly annoying country music on the radio? Today we take a look at the dismal history of the science of dentistry during its formative years. It's time to grit your teeth and dig in. The humble beginnings of dentistry sit a little further back in time than most would expect. In fact, for the longest time it was believed that the earliest form of dental and cranial surgeries were carried out in the Mesolithic Neolithic period, roughly 9,000–7,000 years ago, at least until 1988. The oldest archaeological example of an operative manual intervention on a pathological condition was found on a frozen corpse that was around 14,000 years old by Steffano Benazzi, a paleoanthropologist at the University of Bologna. Well, look at that! And his research team in the Veneto Dolomites near Belluno. The patient in question was a 25-year-old ancient Italian, before he got caught between a rock and a cold place. They had a molar that had clearly been worked on by some form of ancient stone tool, likely flint. It's currently theorized that the cavemen understood the deleterious effects of tooth decay and excised infected tissues in the tooth with the aforementioned sharp stone tools. Aside from that discovery, previously scientists had known about the use of crude toothpicks made from stone and wood, as I presume that mammoth meat was very stringy, and examples of beeswax fillings were found on a 65,000-year-old body, and examples of bow drilling were found in 9,000-year-old molars from a Neolithic graveyard in Pakistan. It seems that drilling into jaws was always in style. Ancient scholars Hippocrates and Aristotle of ancient Greece even contributed to dental science by writing about the eruption patterns of teeth, extractions with forceps, and using wires to stabilize loose teeth and fractured jaws, which was a more common occurrence back then, trust me. The ancient peoples of the world had their own theories on how cavities were formed, with the most well-known example coming from ancient Sumerian texts from about 5000 BC, citing tiny tooth worms as the main culprit. References to the tooth worm were also found in ancient India, Egypt, Japan, and China, as well as Guide to Chalot's promotions as far as the 14th century AD. Ignorance truly is bliss. Now, it wouldn't be an In the Lab episode without some level of horror, so if you're squeamish, I would recommend watching a nice puppy video or something. And for those of you who knew what you were getting into when you clicked on this video, let's press on. The onset of regulated farming brought the world more tooth decay than ever before, especially with the development of sugars in most foods. And if you are unfortunate enough to be born into the plague and war-riddled Middle Ages, dental operations were just as dreadful as everything else. If you had a dreadful toothache and wanted it gone, you would have two common options at the time: the brute strength of your local blacksmith, or if you had a little extra change, the friendly neighborhood barber surgeon. Simple times required slightly less simple tools. The first tool of the trade would be a set of simple iron pliers. The pliers would be used to firmly grasp its mark and yank until the tooth came out, while the surgeon's apprentice watched on taking notes, or picking their nose, depending on their work ethic. Plier extractions had a large margin of error, and the dentist could accidentally extract bone and skin as well as the tooth. That is, if they grabbed the right one in the first place. Another set of pliers called a tooth key were developed to help make the process a bit quicker. It required more of a swish and flick than the pliers. The higher chances of infection could lead you to going through the whole process again. Did I mention that tooth pulling was also used as a torture method back then? No. Things carried on that way for a while until two important tomes of dentistry were written and published in 1771, The Natural History of Human Teeth, and 1778, The Practical Treatises on the Diseases of the Teeth, by British surgeon John Hunter. These two books detailed the first comprehensive outline of the anatomy of the teeth and jaws, and even divided the teeth into 4 new classes: damage, support, tank, and defense. Just kidding. They were incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. The books also gave instructions on how to care for your teeth for the long term, kind of like a life hack channel, but with more words. While these books brought dentistry closer to science than ever, they also popularized some material that other doctors of the time found to be very controversial. Mainly, tooth transplantation. What was once a side hobby for John Hunter became a craze for the rich in England. Well-endowed patients, monetarily speaking, could pay dentists to implant the teeth of others, which usually came from donors wanting to make a quick buck, the poor, or even the no longer living. The implanted teeth rarely took root, however, and usually had to be pulled. Dentures were also being made out of ivory and horse teeth as well, and were usually held together with metal springs. But that made them extremely uncomfortable even by old-timey standards. Oh, right, the elephant in the room. The teeth of those who had gone cold, so to speak, were often taken from their graves by the subjects of a previous video of ours, the body snatchers. Body snatchers and grave robbers could make up to the equivalent of 10,000 modern-day pounds a night by looting teeth alone. These mouth bones were sold to aristocrats and local dentists to be fashioned into the fanciest dentures money could buy. However, in 1815, the body snatchers and grave robbers that specialized in teeth were almost put out of business by the Battle of Waterloo, where 50,000 men met a gruesome end. That meant that supply got a huge boost. So huge, in fact, that everyone, even those in the working middle classes, could afford a grim smile of their own. Stepping away from the barbarism of the Middle Ages and into the 19th century, dentistry made developments in 2 key fields: treatment of cavities and anesthesia. On the topic of treatments, in 1833 to 1850, the Karl Koller introduced amalgam filling materials and also started the controversy known as the Amalgam Wars. In 1839, Charles Goodyear invents the vulcanization process for hardening rubber, which coincidentally worked very well as the material for dentures. In 1841, Alabama enacts the first Dental Practice Act, regulating dentistry in the United States. There were plenty more developments made in the cavity treatments of the time period, so I'll leave a link in the description below in case you're interested in learning more about them. Anyways, on the topic of anesthesia, in 1844, an American dentist in Connecticut named Horace Wells made his contribution to dulling pain with things other than whiskey. While attending a laughing gas, aka nitrous oxide, roadshow, the dentist made a discovery when he noticed an attendee had a large gash on their leg and felt no pain due to the gas's effect. After witnessing strangers get high on painkillers, he purchased some of the gas and began to use it privately in his office until the next year in 1845. That's when he decided to do a public presentation. In fear of overdosing his patient, he gave them a smaller dose than usual for the presentation, much to his regret later. He began the operation with a tooth key, and the patient screamed out in pain and Horace was booed off the stage. Tragically enough, one of Wells' students, William Morton, took credit for the discovery of laughing gas in dental procedures after a successful public operation in 1846. In later years, ether and chloroform were introduced in America and used alongside laughing gas for the longest time. 40 years later, another party drug would be introduced as a local anesthetic. Sometimes back in the day, you needed pain relief in just very specific areas so that the person could continue operating as normal. Like me, for example, when I had to get a root canal at 10:30 and then go off to the lab for some work at 11:10. And a man named Karl Koller in Vienna, Austria, an eye surgeon, had the solution. He discovered that cocaine had anesthetic properties. That's right, booger sugar. He was so sure of his discovery that he created a solution of cocaine and applied it to his eye. And then stuck needles into it and found that he experienced no pain whatsoever. In fact, you're probably experiencing more pain just hearing about it. Hypodermic needles were invented in near parallel to the invention of local anesthetics, and the two would become a staple in dentistry going forward. Dental procedures and anesthetics have only improved since that time, and yet there's still a serious issue that has many people staying as far away from the dentist's office as humanly possible. And that issue is dental fear and anxiety. Let's face it, we've all heard of the horror stories from friends, family, and media outlets. So many, in fact, that one would still expect to see an ash-covered blacksmith, or the PS2 version of Hagrid waiting for you at the dentist chair with a pair of rusty pliers and a thick piece of leather to bite into. A phobia or a fear can be a very hard thing to manage in the office, and as your skeleton doctor, I feel justified in relaying my great discomfort in the presence of needles, and that it was a large concern of mine that caused me to delay my dental appointments. I would also like to remind you, however, that your dental health is part of your whole health, and something as simple as a cavity can affect your heart health further down the road as well as other things. I recommend seeing your dentist at least twice a year, even if you don't have any issues at the moment. Regular cleanings are not only good for your teeth, but they also help save you money on costly operations, like the crown I had recently put in after a root canal. Think of cleaning appointments as a spa day for your mouth. Also, toothbrushes are a lot better than drills, trust me. And if this huge nerd can handle the dentist's office and their taste in music, then so can you. Stay healthy, dear viewers, and I'll see you all in the next video.